Officially, welcome to our June meetup, where today we are here to answer all your questions. What questions pops up? We have created a Miro board. In the chat is the link. I'm going to, in the Miro board, I'm going to start a vote. I think all of the topic is bloody brilliant, but we might not have time for all of them. So I want to see which one is the most important for the participant today. I'm going to give you 4 votes. Okay, so I can say it's definitely the scope creep. That's actually also on 2 now, I see. But there's some overlapping because getting the Scrum team to welcome change to requirements doing and after development and scope creep goes hand in hand, actually. Okay, should we kick off, Bevan? Let's start with the
Yeah.
attempting to influence the entire organization to adapt.
Mm.
Don't. No.
Choose your battles.
Yeah.
No, what I actually mean by that is often we come in with this mindset of we have to make somebody do something. And I see more and more when I work with Agile Coach Scrum Master, we have our backpack full of tool and techniques, and we sometimes get married to we have to do this, we have to do these things. But do we actually? And what do I mean by that is way too often we come in with a force saying we have to do this thing, and we think, okay, now we come into a problem. Leadership doesn't support us. I mean, now we have to make them do it. I think it's this have to we have to look into. But I don't know, Bevan, you and me have had like, a lot of conversations because I know we are in the same mindset here, saying I don't make anybody do anything. What do? I create transparency. So very too often, we actually often have to go back to the principle of values, and the foundation of Scrum is about transparency, inspect, and adapt.
Mm.
So instead of forcing anybody and try to make them, it's actually to understand what is the transparency they lack. And what do I mean by that? When we say influencing upwards, it's probably because we have a need for them to see something. But we're coming from I will make them do it, that doesn't work. But we need to create what transparency would they need to understand that we need to change. And there's a lot of data, again, depending on where it is. What I always go back to is how can I show them the problem? Because if we understand the problem first, then we're more likely to change. Then there's a reason for change instead of going with here is the change. I don't know, Bevan,
Yeah.
if you want
I
to.
mean, but the answer is same, but from a different angle. For me, the first thing that popped into my head was, um, what are you trying to influence? Um, and then for yourself, what do you like? How does influence work on you? So I've seen it quite a lot where people have an us versus them mindset. So if only the leadership could do X, Y, Z. It's because they're doing X, Y, Z. And if that's a default thought that you have, one, that's absolutely normal. That's okay. Number two is that's what you need to challenge because the moment you start seeing people above you in terms of the hierarchy in an organization, as people who have, like you, needs and wants and desires and egos and whatever else it is, you got to find out from them, what is it that they're looking for? What is missing for them? And then instead of trying to influence them, you try to add value to them, which will then, start shifting the behaviors. So it becomes more about a negotiation than it does about, trying to sell something, if that makes sense.
I
Yeah.
saw as we busy being there, somebody to make a comment,
Hmm.
make people without need. So what I actually, Bevan is going to laugh at me now because I just copy paste a slide into our mail board. And I think Bevan's brain is going, Malene cannot do any talk without showing the slide. That's true.
Good slide.
So me and Bevan very much talk often on the spine model. I've forgotten about again, but I actually just said, right, don't make them do stuff. No, we're here to actually understand what is the need. But I see, and when you said it earlier, now also that whole thing about leadership, we want them to do something. And I see often in this whole agile transformation, or we want to make agile, it's often looking downwards instead of also both ways. And in that sentence, is maybe also sometimes to understand our own limitations. So what I've got to learn, Terry, a lot of things pops into my mind now, but what I've gotten to learn over the years is also understand my limitation. And what do I mean when I say that? So I know the Scrum Guide says the Scrum Master should impact upwards and the team, right? Impact the organization. But let's be honest also, in the real world, it can be bloody difficult to impact upwards if you have never ever been in that position like that. Does that mean you need to grow the whole hierarchy and stuff? No, but sometimes I miss that we stop up more and think about that's also just a person. What position are they in? Not like title, but like what seat are they sitting in? What is the pressure on them? What is the reality they are facing? And when we start to see people as humans and understand we all have different pressure and where does it come from, the system that they are in, what does that impact them? So explore a little bit more. And that is part of that going away from let's make them. Now, that also brings me into one thing that I've seen more and more in observation. I've done a lot is this whole thing. A lot of teams tend to be, they need to do, they need to do, we need this buy-in. And I find it as a chicken egg in situation. What comes first? Does leadership allow for it, or do we show we can do it? So I know there was another topic about self-managing also. And I have never, ever actually, oh, that's maybe a lie, but most managers would not honestly saying they micromanage because they often don't know. So what is it? We're under so much pressure, we create an environment that we forget to stop up and explore what is the systemic environment we created for the behavior we get. And that's our job to step back and take the breath and look at that. So when this question, I know now it become very broad, let's maybe ring fence it a little bit in again. The question was, this one, influencing up, attempting to influence the entire organization to adapt it. If I almost summarize what I just said, firstly, understand your limitation. Like, can you put yourself into the seat of whoever you're trying to influence? Can you understand their current environment, understand what matters to them? Because if you don't understand that, it's very difficult to understand what would be the need for them to understand what do I have to show them so we drive change. Bevan, you were listening to my thoughts. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, no, I just want to add like there's one reframe that was coming to mind on there, and it's interesting is that if you are in a team environment, you are there for the organization, right? So by merely being part of a team, influencing upwards is just again, it's like a different way of saying I want something to change for the team. So what tends to happen is we get very stuck into a team environment and then we end up protecting the team. So like, I don't know, I jumped to the other one that says being able to include business people in sprint meetings due to developer sensitivity. And I was like, well, it sounds like we're trying to protect them. And is that the right approach? Is that better for the organization or is it better for the team? And the moment we separate those things, now you start seeing levels. Now you start seeing structures that, now I can't, because I'm not in that space, that circle, I now need to influence them. But we're part of the organization. And that's where, if you look at it from a delivery effectiveness perspective, like what we're actually trying to improve, we're going to go and follow the need and say, well, okay, the executive top down wants to say, developers need to be more productive. I want more velocity. Okay, we'll give you that. And here are things that can improve it. Right. So meeting people's needs generally goes, okay, I acknowledge and I hear your problem. This is what we've done to solve that. And these are things that you could do that would actually solve it even further, right? So, other talks on the wait time and decision making. And it does take time to get there. So if you've only been in that for a few months, sometimes even a few years, it does take time. People take time to change what they believe about work.
I think if we sum it up before we go to the next topic, for me, it's always about show the problems, transparency. Because that's again walking away from making people. If they see the problems there, and then don't maybe I'll pick correction there. Don't just go and show it, also come with the solution. There could maybe be two solutions. Very important thing. When you want to manage up, don't just say, this is my problem. No, this is a problem. This is what I suggest we do about it. That is kind of like, that's the approach I always take, no matter what level we're talking at. I create transparency so we can inspect adapt, but I've done the inspect and adaptation actually for them. Not the adaptation though, if you need input from them. And that can be taken from many angles. I want to make sure that we cover not just one topic today, so it's more short. If anybody have questions, please pop them in the chat or unmute yourself.
Hmm.
Now the next one, there's three that got twos that actually overlap each other. So we have the getting the Scrum team to welcome change to requirements during and after development. That also goes hand in hand with developers expecting comprehensive documentation and mock-ups over communication with the PO or rest of the dev team, which are actually also would combine with the scope creep. So we have something about here,
Just about to say.
creep, but it actually summarized very nicely. People stuck in the old way of working, it sounds like. I don't know, Bevan, if you want to kick that one off.
Oh, I love this topic. It's one of my favorites. There's two things that I'll talk about. There's the accountability, right? And accountability needs responsibility and consequence, right? So and then the other one is just going back to project management fundamentals, right? The iron triangle of project management. If you're blunt about it, so completely just looking at delivery, the whole point of a sprint is to fix time and fix cost, right? So we're fixing time, fixing cost, same team, same period, 10 days if you're doing a 2 week sprint. Scope is variable. So if you think about scope creep means that we already have got fixed scope. So that's probably a challenge on its own. So if we've fixed our scope, then of course you'll have scope creep because now you've contracted around something very specific and you need to kind of flex on that. So from an agility perspective, it just means that then it might take longer to deliver or shorter, or it might cost us more. So if you in a sprint have fixed your scope, your budget, and your time, this is going to drive your developers, one, crazy, two, it's going to result in that behavior of them expecting very clear contractual information. So what generally tends to work? There needs to be 100% responsibility for the team doing the work to be able to plan their sprint. In many cases where I see this happening, there are two things that I'll always ask first. Who decides what the sprint plan is? And then who attends the sprint review, right? The reason for the first one is because you need to give that responsibility. In most cases, teams do actually create their own sprint plans, luckily enough. It's the second question that always nails it. You say, who attends your sprint review? And they go, the product owner. And you're going, well, so the product owner is part of the Scrum team, right? It's one of the accountabilities. Change that to being someone outside, someone with a bit of authority, right? Because if the team has the responsibility of creating their own sprint based on their own understanding of scope and what they can do, they're going to take more ownership of the process of getting work in. So it's less about you give me requirements that are well formed versus, man, if we don't want to get into trouble, for lack of a better term, at our sprint review, we better make sure that we've actually thought about how we're going to deliver and what we're going to deliver. And if we can't, we better make sure we raise it early, right? So yeah, there's a lot of other variables in there, but from a point, from a getting started, is those are the things that I see as levers that create the most impact. Even if they're initially negative, most change kind of goes through a bit of a dip anyway. Maggie, I see you got a hand. Come on in.
Yeah, I am not sure if some of the other participants here or currently work in an environment where they have business analysts, for example, who are creating business requirement specifications. If I take an example in my company, we try to create user stories with acceptance criteria, and sort of there's a little bit of a misalignment in the sense that it's a BA and not a product owner, and they kind of pass document on then to the development team, and then we go through a sprint planning exercise. But regardless, there is this idea that is so fundamentally ingrained into an organization that you need that you have to have a BRS, and that really does define your scope, right? If we talking realistically, right, that is your scope fixed, and you essentially break that down into sprints. But inevitably, what we see happen is scope creep, right? Maybe a requirement wasn't defined well enough, okay, in terms of its acceptance criteria, or maybe we didn't fully understand it when we were speccing it out. And now all of a sudden, we projected our budget to our sprints to take 10 sprints, and now we are 4 weeks or 6 weeks overdue. And to have to be, number one, accountable for that. A lot of the time when I'm working, even in my previous jobs working for consultancies, we work on like fixed budgets. It's not as if the companies are selling on a sprint by sprint basis. So how do you now account for that additional change, that agile aspect, right? Hey, let's inspect and adapt. You know what? I really like that, but can you change it a little bit? And I'm like, okay, sure, I'll change it for you. But I mean, at what cost? And I feel like right now, literally, one of my other project managers said to me this morning, I'm going to go and use Claude to generate me a scope document that I'm going to give to the client, and they're going to sign off on that document so that we do not get scope creep. They're going to sign every single user story and every single acceptance criteria. They're going to sign it. And, so I think I'm trying to elaborate my problems that I'm having. You can see that there's quite a few.
Common.
It's a complex.
So common.
It is very common. That's why I'm saying.
I'm trying to take it away, because you're not alone. Most companies and big teams we walk into have that issue, and it's actually an issue between what I call the perfect world and the old world. What does that mean? That means we very often talk about the perfect world, but you're stuck in the old world. And often many training also you go on will talk about the perfect. Also what Bevan said, right? We still have the triangle. It just changed. Yes, that's perfect. But let's face it, you are not in the perfect world tomorrow. So it's actually understanding, and that's where I see a lot of Scrum Master Agile coaches think our job is to force some sort of framework in. I've simplified right now, right? Saying, we need to make them do Scrum. We need to make them do PI planning, whatever. But it's actually I'm saying, no, you need to mature to become benefit. So what I recently have done in my training is changing the conversation, saying most teams are actually not mature to do Scrum. So instead of focus on Scrum, focus on how can you mature them to do it. So what you're saying there is, firstly, we want to get to that from this. And what you were talking about, right, made me think about this picture. Because firstly, it's again, if we now also go back to why do we have this conversation? So we can see it, right? We know the perfect plan you created it's not going to happen. I think we all have seen these pictures, right? We plan the perfect plan. Why do we have scope creep? It's because this is reality. And it does not matter how much planning we do, we will never be able to see the plan, especially in the days with AI. Why do I mention that? It's because the complexity, which is uncertainty, is extreme in these days, right? Like, did your company budget for half a year ago with a 30% increase in fuel
productivity or no?
In fuel,
exactly.
Like that's what happens in the world that impacts. No, they didn't, right? A simple little thing that they did not have that in their project plans, that suddenly fuel increase. Now people are thinking, why do you mention that? Because it has an impact on everything we do. No, it's not just fuel increase. That dribble down to everything. Everybody needs to transport something. Maybe you'll say now, no, I have a software system. Yeah, you probably also still had to move to a company or client or something, right? It impacts everything. Now, let's go 2 steps back. First thing is to reality, is to saying, yes, we can do this, but that's just to understand. So I know both me and Bevan love to use the Google Maps example. Google Maps seems like a straight plan, right? But it's not. When we use Google Maps, it's constantly recalculate to see what is actually in front of it. Is there now a shorter route? Is there something? What can change? So we need to firstly learn to say, yes, we do have a plan, because that's what we're stuck in, right? Our organization are stuck in a BS document. They're stuck in this way of working. Now, what do? We start to say, okay, can we be adaptable? Now, there's many things into this. Firstly, it is actually to understand, what does adaptable look like? So what I'd like to say, and that's also a little bit extreme, I'm going to now take a little bit lengthy to kind of cover more of these topics. For me, there is no such thing as scope creep. It's not a word. Because
but
that
everyone
already shows,
uses it. Everyone uses
it. But that's where we need to start training the brain. So it also comes to a little bit to this one, developers expecting competitive documentation. So a lot of these things, our job is to train people to get away from old patterns. All of this talk about old patterns. Why are people so stuck on scope creep? Well, now that had become the fancy word. Back in the days, we'd call it risk or issues, right? It wasn't like, now it just become even more stuck in it. Now, what does mean by that? When I say it doesn't exist, is we as Agile Coach Scrum Masters need to start trading people, saying, no, let's not call it scope creep. It is a change. And with a change, we have the demand, or the obligation to respond. That's one of the Agile values. So what many people does, they think we react to change, which means we just change. Customer says jump, we ask how high. No, that's not agility. Responding to change is, okay, let's look at the change request. I would much rather use change request than scope creep. I just don't call it change. Let's look at it. It's part of our road here. Now we're running up to 100 meters and see, sure, in our plan, there was no stones here. What is our plan now? Well, we can choose to go left or right or fly over. Now, responding is to look at our option. Sometimes our option is that, no, we can't go further, we end our project here. Sometimes it's, no, we need to develop something so we can move on. So adjustment is very much like the Google Maps. We are still on track to get there, but there will be bumps on the road, and we need to be able to navigate those. Now, in a software industry with a very much old school, the most thing we should use is saying no. But we shouldn't say no based on just because it's scope creep. No, we should know because we go into the data to understand what is the impact. And here we're saying like, we come into here. Is this actually a scope creep? Not really, because we actually had a mountain bike, so we could actually just continue. It was just a little bump. It won't have the bigger impact, so let's just do it. Oh, no, we have a road cycle. We cannot go over here. We need to find something else. And then we pivot. But when we pivot, and that come back to here. So now if we start changing that mindset, we start to empower the way we work, because if we need to be able to be flexible, now we start suddenly, instead of again forced to say you have to be flexible because of Agile, no, we practice it, saying, okay, if we have to now stop and change our tire from road tires to mountain bike tires, that there might be something else that we can't do. What does that mean? Well, that means that we had planned, when we get to the nice view, we will stop for 2 hours to look out. Let's maybe shorten that to only 1 hour. So we look into our requirements, saying, what could we do differently? And that's when we meant scope is not flexible. Let me try to make a software example. It actually also now goes very much to a lot of these things. All of the thing is about, we need to train our team in working differently. What does that mean? So even here, developers expecting competitive documentation, it is because they're used to it. And when we are under big pressure, we like to what we're used to. We don't want to change. So it's easy to say, just give me so I can do it. We have to create that space. Okay, what little step can we take so we change this? Now, for many years ago, I was a product owner on a rewrite on manufacturing and warehouse system. It was a typical waterfall. So, it was, here's the old system, write it into a new system.
Yeah.
It cannot become more waterfall, right? We had a 2-year project plan. It has to be done. Of course, it had outlined all the functionality we had to do in the old system because, hey, it was a one-to-one. Now I joined and I'm agile, right? So I was like, no, I can't work like that. It was very much this, right? Everything was actually fixed. The time was fixed, the budget was fixed, the scope was fixed, everything was fixed. It's a typical project. Now, as we start, I of course made it agile. What does that mean? I start talking with the customer. Now, firstly, the executive was like, you don't need to talk with the customer. You can just sit and click around in the system and figure out what it does and then build it based on that. But as I was talking with the customer, I found more functionality they were not even using. So what did I do? And that's also a different technique that I trained product owner. I don't have to have a perfect. If teams are using a burn-up chart, that's always what I recommend for Scrum, for product owners to understand. So here, but just have quickly a very simple one. But the technique of a burn-up chart should give you product owner, so this is just a one I made in another training session, should give you product owner the capability of saying, okay, if we do story points, understand how much average story points, what can we do per sprint? After every sprint, we can see, are we on track or not? So this is now I'm opening up for another conversation here about story points. We'll get back to that. Why do I show you this? Well, because this I did for our big project. It was a 2-year project. What did that help me to do as a product owner was after every 2 weeks, I can go and see, are we above or are we under? Of course, it also helped me guide me as a product owner because if we were under, I were not so easy to change stuff. We had to get more staked. If we were above, I'm more likely to change stuff. But what it also can happen is, if you do this correctly, when something new comes in or a change, we can immediately size it and see what would the impact be. What should we not be doing? So to give you a practical example, in this manufacturing warehouse system, there was this one button. Nobody could tell me what it was doing. And I asked the general manager, is this important? And he said, yes. I was laughing. And then he also could kind of see the way, like, he agreed with me. He had always been there to the whole life in this system, and he could not tell me who would using it. So what happened? I said, well, could we not develop this button because nobody's using it? And instead, there was this functionality that we had to redo a filter. It was done like the old system, but it was ineffective for the company. And I said, yes, you can redo that instead if it is. Why could I make those decisions as a product owner? Because I had the data to understand what would the impact be. So we actually took in that case, I still remember it was a size 40 story out of the backlog and put in a size 2 instead. There was a massive change, right? Massive scope. Yes, now you're saying, no, but it was less, Malene. So of course we do that. Yeah, but it's about this transparency always. Be flexible on your scope. But if you don't have a good enough product owner to understand that, that brings us to another challenge. So Maggie, what you were saying, we have this business analyst, right? Do we actually have a equipped product owner to manage the backlog, to make these decisions based on data? So what we see as we dig down into these holes, the anti-patterns come from blocks of multiple missing links, of haven't matured these aspects good enough to actually be there.
I have a very cringy question to ask, and you
Go
probably
for
go,
it.
oh, shudder. But do you think that a burn down chart works if your value metric is not necessarily story points, but a time estimate?
No. So firstly, the way I use burn down and burn up is 2 different things. I use burn down for the sprint and burn up for the project future looking.
Sorry, for
now,
burn up chart, can it work with the time estimate on your...
So that's a whole another topic, and I know we also have the topic. So actually, I don't know if you guys saw, next month's meetup is going to be on relative sizing and estimation in general. So I would say let's keep that conversation for that day because that's a massive topic by itself. So that's dedicated for next month's meetup to talk about that. How do we move
short
away?
Answer no.
Short answer no.
Thank you.
So that again gives me another anti-pattern that comes up that needs to be worked on. What we need, if I sum this up, what we need to is actually much more focus on what next step can be mature to get closer to this? How do we get better at getting to the perfect world? I don't know if Bevan, I've been talking a lot now. Is there something you want to add?
Nah, I put some comments in the chats. I mean, it's pretty much it. So just to the earlier point that the sprint review, that's how you build that empathy for people to actually see how things get built. So yeah. Oh,
So let's
don't have time
maybe,
to make charts when everything is burning. Well, you're right. If things are burning, maybe fire extinguisher first.
I think to maybe sum it up, like the whole scope creep, for me, a big change also comes in what words do we use. Scope creep has a negativity because we have it like, you changed my plan, you can't change my plan. So one simple little way is think about the words you use because they do matter to the human brain. And if we keep talking negative and create this environment about we do not accept scope creep, yeah, but the reality is you kind of do because we're all in this, right? The matter is to make decisions. What are we not going to do? What are we doing and what not we going to do? And by evolving that and maturing that, you will start to become, okay, we have to be flexible in scope.
You just triggered a thought that I'd forgotten about and brought back in again. So another value is being able to show not just again from a product perspective, but then also from a team perspective as well. So, you know, when you can show things like a burn-up chart and how things change, I always like to take a look or observe sprint reviews that happen to go, well, or even daily stand-ups or daily scrums, whatever you want to call them in your organization. But when we've got our plan, what happens when things come in? So whether it's an incident, whether it's a change in scope, whatever it is, what is the team's response to that? Do they, or moan about it first because they're like, oh, scope creep, and then they do it anyway? What do they take out? So the question I always ask is this is a trade-off. If we've created a plan based on what we know about our scope and what we know about our capacity, and you've now increased or made a change, have you taken something out? Have you shown the impact, right? So if your product owner has done all this work creating a return on investment ordered backlog, and something new comes in that some senior stakeholder just thought up, how are they empowered to show that by doing this one thing, it's actually going to knock out 3 or 4 of these other really valuable problems that we're trying to solve as well? And again, it's just being able to create that level of transparency into it to say, yeah, absolutely, you can change things whenever you want. There's a impact to that change. And if you're okay with the impact, then at least you know it. But then you're also, from a team perspective, going, okay, well, if you're okay with us taking this out, then so be it. Because then the impact of that scope creep or change itself is limited as well. So it's something you could see how you can try that.
We also had the question how to work towards deadlines. Well, if you actually mature this good enough, we can work with deadlines. We have 2 kinds of deadlines. The one is we have to get all of this done. Then we set the time. So again, what do you fix here? You can't fix it all, right? In the proper agility way, we would say, okay, if we have a deadline here, the data's fixed, then what we can do will be flexible. And that's again into proper product ownership to saying, what can we get done here? What's most valuable before here? So for that whole thing about working to deadline means you need to be even better at being flexible on your scope. We can't get it all done, and we shouldn't. We should do what's most important. And that's how we should start working much more effective. Another thing that came to my mind, just try to close off these 2 topics, getting the Scrum team to welcome change to requirements during and after development. So when I earlier said this whole, for me, there is nothing called scope team, I call it change. And another little brain activity I do with teams is to, instead of calling it done, well, I do call it done, right? But that's when it's done. What I try to mature in the company, in teams I work with, is as long as we are in the sprint, it is what I have so far. So what I try to, there's 2 aspects of this. Firstly, I actually incorporate this into many teams saying, you have to show to the product owner or whoever needs to kind of sign off before you put it into done. Sprint review and all those things are not to say, is it done? No, it's like we work as a team. It means we work together to develop something. That means we get the stakeholders to look over our shoulder, see like, oh, this is what I've done so far. Can you please give me input? So I work a lot, again, the change of this and getting them for different behavior is to understand you need to incorporate feedback as many times as possible. And a little trick I've done there is if your team do task or something, and one team we actually created in the middle of all tasks, we put a task in saying, connect with the PO. Now you can say, is that not overkill? No, but it helped them, remind them, and change the different behavior. So what is it I try to put into place is all these kind of small that can help train the new behavior. Now, when they got mature and working with the product owner, of course, we didn't have, it could also be a user or something, right? Try to implement some techniques that makes them train a new behavior. And one thing for the brain is, this is what I have so far, already make the brain being more positive to feedback. So when you, for example, send from developer over to tester, again, developer's mindset needs to be, this is what I have so far. Can you please test it for me? Handing over to tester doesn't mean done. Now the brain is much more saying, okay, we are together creating the best. And I try to create saying, as long as something is a sprint, it's not done. Yes, I know we move it into done, but that mindset is saying we can still change it, because if one suddenly said, oh, the blue shouldn't have been that blue, it should be this blue, let's just fix it while we add it. Because that's the quickest time to fix it rather than have to get back to it. That also very much, I think we've summed it up very nicely now with the whole developers. All of these things come from we are so busy, we're stuck in an old way of working, and change does not come overnight. Change is about practicing new ways of working. That's not one-time practicing. I love to do the whole sport team, right? It's over and over again practicing. Of course, you develop one comprehensive documentation and mock-ups, that's what they're used for. Now we have to practice this. What can we do differently? What could we change? Just starting writing user story is not the answer, by the way. It is really to go on learning and saying, okay, what could we change? One thing I like, to give a practical example, is I have this summer rule where we start product backlog refinement, where I say, first time a BA or product owner take a product backlog item into the team, it should just be a title. Because now you actually help mature the behavior of a business analyst, a product owner, and development in saying, old school, where a business analyst has to write everything perfect before it goes off. Yeah, but then we have this one view, and we're not being exploring on ideas. You have hired expert to come up with a solution, but now you're telling them what to do. So I say, saying, as a BA, take that title in, and it will be so, again, something that needs to be changed, managed, and handhold them into, because they think I'm failing as my job because my job is to come with all the comprehensive documentation. No, just take a title in there and ask, what questions do you have? What question comes to your mind when you see this? Because it helps then the BA to get, okay, there's the question that come up. I didn't even think about that. So the first product backlog refinement that's with a new product backlog item is to get an understanding from what question is there in the room we need to solve. Is there maybe a different solve? And this, again, is a journey of training them into maturity. Now you take it second time. The product owner and BA have found question or answer to all the question comes in, have a bit more information saying what question is now coming up. Now you start training the developer to work with the product owner, and you try to create a safe space where, no, this is actually for question and challenge each other. We help each other develop the solution, not just one way. And that way you mature. So my thumb rule is a product backlog items to practice this and train it. My thumb rule is a product backlog item should be at least 3 times into a product backlog refinement. First time a title, next time a little bit answer those questions. That's like more documentation. Last time should be rounding up. That's kind of, it's just a thumb rule, but like, let's train that new way of working rather than just forcing it in.
So you reminded me, Malene, there's probably one of my favorite experiments that I always recommend people to do, which I love doing, but it causes a lot of shock in an organization that's still very, set up in BRS to hand over to developers, is if you've got the license to start bringing in events. So let's say you're going to say, cool, I'm going to have a backlog refinement event. I've got to show people what to do. Create a rule in the refinement that you can spend no more than 10 minutes on a requirement. And most people are like, no, there's no way, we've done this. And look, it's a 50-page document and there's no way. Start with that, right? Start with that, having that conversation. because the conversation, especially with the different people or different skill sets in the room, is going to be what creates a better document at the end of the day, for lack of a better term. Because what you want to encourage, exactly what Malene says, you want to start bringing the team closer to the analyst. You might not be able to change it, right? So in some organizations, people, are really, really strongly attached to the role, right? Because that's their context. So they're going to want to go off and write. And what you have to do is realize, well, there's two things. One, I'm going to work with them, not against them. They've got needs, they've got things that they want. And what I want to empower them to be is a facilitator, because that's what their skill is. The skill of analysis is a deep skill. So, here's a bunch of techniques that you could use that's a lot more collaborative, that actually brings in some of this information earlier. And then number two is we manage by metrics. So we measure the impact of doing phased things. So you start getting metrics in, like how long does it actually spend in analysis versus development? Because once you've got a baseline from a number perspective, you can always see whether the changes that you're bringing in are improving or not. And I've never worked with a team where they've been working closer together on the requirements that has resulted in them delivering worse. It actually always kind of shows a trend towards, hey, wait a minute, we reduced the total time for delivery by, a decent percentage. So yeah, just some more things to try.
I think there was also a comment in the chat, don't have time to make charts when everything is burning. I think that's so I was on a panel discussion yesterday on Agile coaching ethical. And one thing I often say is we often get so busy in the work that we forget to look after ourselves. And one thing I always stood to me is you cannot add value to somebody if you are not that yourself. What does that mean? So I normally use the one saying, put the air mask on yourself before you put it on everybody else. If we are too busy burning out, everything is running around, how can we show up? And now I have small kids, so I also like to make the example, right? The kids don't do what you say, they do what you do. And if you show up as a burned out, tired, can't make a better decision, what is your team going to do? The exact same, right? You're not showing them how it should be. So the biggest step we can do is actually look after ourselves first. And yes, I know that's much easier said than done because, hey, we all have to deliver. But what I say more and more is sit down, take a breath, and understand what is the most important thing. And if you can't breathe in the environment you are right now, then figure out what first step do we need to take to make you able to breathe. Because you can't train other people and upskill other people if you can't be there yourself. So I think that, like, again, where do we start in all of this? We need to start being more effective ourselves towards ourselves. There was also another, I just wanted to share, lack of participation in retrospective. So for a couple of months ago, me and Bevan did a whole topic on data-driven retrospective. So I will suggest we don't cover this one today, but suggest go to our YouTube channel. There's a recording on lack of participant in retrospective. So not exactly that, but it's the recording is about data-driven retrospective that definitely helps on this. And we definitely touched on this topic in that meetup. I find this one interesting, Bevan. Hey, managing team chaos and respecting Scrum self-organization rule. What comes to my mind, two things. As a Scrum Master, you are also part of the team, but you are also part of self-organizing. Self-organizing, or in Scrum actually says self-managing, doesn't mean we don't have a manager or leader, whatever we're going to call it. So here I'm not talking, when we talk self-organized, self-managing, we're not talking about reporting lines. We're talking about creating an environment and take ownership of the way and how you work. What does that mean? That means when we talk about, again, it's about self-managing, anybody can manage, anybody can be the leader. So when we have a team that works together, if we have nobody standing up and taking the lead, you go nowhere. We always have to have somebody that takes the lead. Self-managing is that hat can change depending on what scenario we're in. So let's say we as a team was out on a survival not that I wish, in the wooden, right? If we just all sit down, look at each other and saying, what should we do? I don't know. Nothing will happen. We'll probably not survive, right? What happens there? One man steps up and take the lead. Is it always the same one? No. Is it always different? But what is important there is we go away from the behavior of micromanaging and more have the behavior of leadership. Let's rather lead this team in the right way. So as a Scrum Master, you can put on the hat. So here it was like saying, manage team chaos. Well, again, we go back to a lot of what we have said today, create transparency. What is the chaos? Is it that they don't deliver? Show them the data. A question I like is saying, why are we here if we don't deliver? I thought there was another comment earlier also saying, how can we make team realize that delivery is important? Well, guess what? You don't have a job tomorrow if you guys don't deliver. Like, right? It's as simple as that. But let's show it with data also. What is the problem actually? Like a lot of people think, oh, when we Scrum Masters, Agile Coaches, we just should sit and talk about feeling and those things. No, we still have to deliver because else we don't have a job tomorrow. But in that, we can take on a leadership role of saying, okay, so let's say, so I don't know exactly what the problem is here. It could be they don't deliver in the sprint. Last 5 sprints, they have misdelivered. Show the data. Again, create transparency, saying, what are we going to do about this? Maybe then if we put the two questions together, saying they don't value, well, they don't take it serious about delivery, then start there saying, why do we exist as a team? I think that is maybe a good question to start with, to get them to think about why we're here actually. And if they become on fluffy stuff, I would always say back, no, why are we actually here? We're here to serve. Like our job is always to like deliver something, no matter what position you're in. Don't know, Bevan, if you want to add something to that.
Yeah, I'm thinking, I don't know, the assumptions I'm making from reading this is a lot of organizations these days, and you can kind of see it in the job market where the role Scrum Master gets turned into delivery manager, right? And it is a common thing because most people are never actually empowered or given the capabilities to manage delivery in such a manner. But if we really go to the heart of Scrum, the answer was always there. The best Scrum Master training I ever got was when I became a manager of a team, because my default is to fix stuff. Like I love fixing stuff. If I see a problem, I'm going to solve it. When you're a manager, that doesn't scale, right? So I was creating chaos because I would just jump in. And the problem is that if you're too helpful, people start going, well, you know what, if we just leave it long enough, Bevan will fix it, right? I see that with so many teams. Oh, the Jira boards aren't being updated. Let's just leave it for a little bit because it's, we want to focus the developers. They must be in the code, man, the whole time. Never mind the fact that they've got to do some thinking sometime as well. Got to be in the code for productivity, and the Scrum Master can update the Jira board. All right, that's the kind of like chaos and management. So again, what can you do if you're a Scrum Master or in delivery manager? Again, set those boundaries that allows the team to say, you own this, I own this. I'm going to make this transparency. I'm going to reflect it back to you. But if you don't deliver, you don't deliver. My job is I'm going to make it super transparent to the rest of the organization. I'm not going to throw you under the bus because remember, we don't manage the delivery of people. We manage the delivery of the work. So everything you do, you're not trying to single out people. You're not trying to make it about them. It's transparency saying, hey, look, this is what I'm seeing. If this isn't reflecting the reality, what's missing? So yeah, that's...
And maybe then also invert, right, Bevan, to the other one, because it's like, do you want me to share this? Like, what are we going to do about it? What story do you want to share with the bigger picture? So it's also be that whole teach them on what does these things actually mean. Again, it's a lot to do also with our own behavior. If we are under pressure, we often fall into that category, let me do it, because that's what we've been taught through the years. That's the approach of making change. I'll just tell them what to do.
And also, it's also not your gambit, within your gambit, to solve every organization there is, right? So just like, it's something that I think maybe the community doesn't talk about enough as well, is like, yes, even with all of this, you're still going to have people that are not great people in organizations. They're a minority, right? Sometimes it doesn't feel that way, but I guarantee you they're an exceptional minority. You do not have to fix them. You do not have to be the person that solves this whole problem. You're going to do the best that you can with the information you have, make things transparent, do what you can do, but you can't fix everything. So like, I think that's another topic. Malene recently published a nice article about that, that also talks about that. If we try to be too much of everything to everyone, we actually become nothing. So yeah, give yourself that permission.
I am reflecting a lot these days on our Agile community and also Scrum Masters, Agile coaches, in the sense of is it us that has failed a little bit, in the sense of, to be very blunt, all the comments that came up today in our, not comments, all the questions that came up to our session today, nothing is new. Nothing is new. It's been the same over the last 10 years in our community. The same question, the same thing. What happens, and I think a learning we need to take away, is this: we are too busy to create sustainable change because we don't have the air mask on ourselves. We're still stuck in this, let's force change, let's do this, let's make them do Scrum, let's do all of these things. And now with AI coming into it, the stress is just even more. So what I realized, I think we had a conversation not long ago, me and Bevan, that whole thing about, we have to look more after ourselves, but that becomes fluff. So it's also, it can become fluff, not, but that whole thing, where's the balance, right? We need to deliver while we look, and that's our key to success going forward. How can we still deliver while we look after ourselves and balance that need? And in that, I think the most important is transparency and data. So we can move it on. That's very much what we've been talking about today, hey? Thank you so much, ladies, for joining us today. It's been awesome.
Well, thank you so much.
And let us know
Definitely
if there's
be in the next meetup.
Remember, next meetup is about sizing. And if there's anything else you have, like a very specific, like, send it to us and we'll make a meetup around it. I saw the sizing has come up multiple times. That's why I made the saying, like, that's our next topic, to go in depth with that.